You might think this is a great show. I might think it's only so-so. What else do you expect from an episode where everything is relative? I'm not sorry. This is a review of the Star Trek Voyager episode Relativity. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know what will have had been happening in it, be warned, spoilers beyond this point. It's the episode where a member of Voyager's crew is sent back in time and experiences significant events from the ship's past. No, not that one. The first time they did that premise. Here, I'll just tell you about it. It's 5 years ago. Voyager is still docked at the shipyard, and Captain Janeway is beaming aboard for her first inspection of her new command. We follow Janeway and this Admiral guy around for a few minutes as they trade technobabble listing the ship's schematics, and Admiral guy shows her the bridge, and she sits in the captain's chair for the first time, and she visits her ready room and orders coffee from the replicator, and then she goes back out to the bridge and walks to the forward console and tells an ensign working there, "Hey, shove over, peon, captain coming through." And as the ensign moves out of the way, we see that the ensign is 7 of 9. 7 seems to be secretly communicating with someone, and she tells that someone, "No sign of the weapon on the bridge." And the someone she's talking to says, "Keep scanning." 7 keeps looking for whatever she's looking for. She runs into Janeway again in the briefing room. Janeway's complaining to the Admiral about what a shitty room this is, and she says to 7, "Hey, Ensign, what do you think of this room? Shitty, right? It's a shitty room?" And 7 says, not being a member of your crew from the future, I think it's fine." And Janeway's like, "To hell with you, random ensign who is unknown to me," and leaves. 7 is obviously on an important mission to prevent something catastrophic from happening to Voyager in the past. So while she continues her pursuit of this mysterious weapon, we keep following Janeway and Admiral Guy around for a while longer. Look, it's Janeway's first meeting with the holographic doctor in sickbay. Now we can say we've seen that. Eventually, we get back to 7 of 9, who is in main engineering fending off Lieutenant Carey. He sees her and says, "Hey, I'm Lieutenant Carey. I see you're operating a computer console. Do you like computers?" And she's like, "Ew, get away," and flees into a maintenance tube. She locates the weapon she's been looking for, but she can't disarm it because it's not properly aligned with this time frame. So I guess it's there, but also it's not there. Anyway, 7's activities have been detected by Voyager's crew, and they need to beam her out of there, they being the people who sent her here. These people, who are worried that if they beam her out while she's caught in the interference created by the weapon, she'll be seriously injured. But the guy in charge says, "Just do it." So they beam 7 of 9 out, and she materializes on this ship and immediately falls down and dies. This guy, who I guess is the first officer, says, "See, I told you this would happen." And this guy, the captain, says, "Big deal, we work on a time travel ship. Just go back and recruit her from the past again." The first officer says, "But we've already recruited her 3 times. If we do it a 4th time, she might develop the dreaded temporal psychosis." The captain's like, "Will you just do it?" We cut to Voyager, where 7 of 9 is being examined by the doctor. She's been experiencing double vision, and after briefly browsing WebMD, she's concluded that she's definitely dying. The doctor's like, "Nah, you're good, you just need a shot of this shit." And he gives her an injection that clears her vision right up, except for the greenish tint that she's apparently stuck with because she's a Borg. On her way through the corridor, she runs into Tom Paris, who recruits her to be his partner in a doubles ping-pong tournament. Then we cut to sickbay, where the doctor treats Captain Janeway for space sickness and observes that he's been getting an unusually high number of space sickness cases today. I guess they're all getting sick of space. Temporal distortions start to appear all over the ship, time moving at different rates in different sections. That must be what's causing the space sickness. 7 and B'Elanna discover the time weapon in the tube, but only 7 can see it thanks to her Borg eyeballs. The time weapon is the source of the temporal distortions, but Tuvok can't lock on to beam it off the ship due to the distortions. B'Elanna tells Janeway if they don't do something soon, the time distortions will grow more severe and eventually destroy the ship. And then that's what happens. But right before it happens, the first officer from the future ship beams in and grabs 7 of 9. They arrive on the future ship, and the captain's like, "Hi, I'm Captain Braxton, and this guy is Lieutenant Duquesne, and you're on the Federation timeship Relativity, and we're from the 29th century, and we're trying to find an unknown saboteur who has traveled into the past and planted a time bomb on Voyager." Get it? Time bomb in the future. That joke is hilarious. Anyway, we want to prevent the destruction of Voyager because that'll really mess up the timeline, and we need your help because your Borg components can detect temporal distortions better than our equipment, even though we're on a ship from 500 years in the future that only does time travel stuff, which seems like a stretch, I know, but just go with it. Seven gets a rundown of her mission, and Captain Braxton shows her a holographic simulation of Voyager so she knows exactly where to look for the time weapon. He tells her that disarming the weapon hasn't worked the previous times she's tried, so this time she's being sent to a different era of Voyager's history to hopefully catch the saboteur before they plant the bomb. Oh, one more thing, Braxton says. Watch out for Janeway. When it comes to fucking my shit up through time travel, she has quite a history. Anything. Never mind. The point is, she's been responsible for time travel shenanigans in the past, and I've always had to clean up after her. She never thinks about the unintended consequences of her actions. This one time, she was responsible for me being stranded in the 20th century for 30 years. That was rough. Except for those years in the 1980s when I worked as an independent cargo pilot, and I was always dragging my ingeniously resourceful best friend into my harebrained misadventures. That was fun. They beam Seven into Voyager's past during an attack by the Kazon, circa Season 2. She goes to the location of the time weapon and finds that it hasn't been placed yet. Good. Now all she's got to do is hang out and wait for the saboteur to show up. Except Harry detects the temporal disruption created by Seven's presence, and Janeway recognizes it as having the same frequency as they detected back when Voyager was still at the shipyard. She orders force fields erected around the section of the ship where the disruption was detected, and not only do those force fields trap Seven, they also cut her off from being able to talk to Braxton and Duquesne on the timeship. Future technology seems like it really sucks, you know? Janeway confronts Seven and recognizes her as the random ensign she spoke to in the briefing room back in the day. Seven tries to evade Janeway's questions, but eventually she just comes out and says, "Okay, look, I'm 7 of 9. I used to be a Borg, but not anymore. I'm going to be a member of your crew starting like 2 years from now, and I've been sent back in time to catch a saboteur who is trying to plant a time bomb," which is funny in the future for some reason, "that will destroy Voyager like 3 years from now. Oh, hey, look at that. My future tricorder just detected the saboteur. They're here. Want to help me catch him?" And Janeway's like, "Yes, lower the force field." And Seven and Janeway run to where the time weapon is supposed to be planted, and they catch the saboteur in the act, and the mysterious saboteur is Captain Braxton. Back aboard the timeship, that Captain Braxton is listening in like, well, this is awkward. Saboteur Braxton explains that he's from Captain Braxton's future, where he's developed temporal psychosis as a result of having to fix so many of Janeway's time travel violations. He's come back to destroy Voyager, so that he and Janeway will never meet, and the events that lead to his temporal psychosis never happen. It's a good plan. On the timeship, Duquesne steps up and says, "Captain Braxton, I'm taking command of this vessel and relieving you of duty for crimes you're going to commit." Braxton is like, "What kind of Minority Report bullshit is this?" Meanwhile, Saboteur Braxton beams away before Seven and Janeway can grab him. The timeship tracks him to another period in Voyager's history, and 7 of 9 says, "Damn the risk of temporal psychosis, beam me to his location." So they do, and it turns out it's back when Voyager is still in the shipyard, and 7 shoots at Braxton and runs past Janeway and the Admiral guy in the corridor. Braxton beams away again to another point in Voyager's history, and 7 beams after him again. This time, they wind up back in the present, during the ping-pong match. I guess Braxton's just scrolling through the recent history on his time transporter. 7 manages to shoot Braxton's tricorder out of his hand before he gets away, so he's stuck on Voyager in this time frame now. Then, 7 collapses from all the time jumping. Her counterpart from this time frame, who's really just her from a few hours ago, is like, "So what's going on?" And Seven explains to herself that Braxton is trying to destroy Voyager and they have to stop him. Then she gets beamed back to the timeship, leaving the other Seven to chase down Braxton. Seven and Janeway corner Braxton, and the timeship beams him away. Then, the timeship beams up Janeway, too. Aboard the timeship, Duquesne explains to Janeway that even though they've successfully captured Braxton and prevented the destruction of Voyager, in doing so, they've created numerous minor changes to the original timeline that need to be corrected. So now, because Seven is too weak from her multiple time jumps to go again, they need Janeway to go back to right after Saboteur Braxton beamed aboard Voyager the first time and capture him then, before any of the other changes to the timeline can happen. Janeway's like, is that really necessary? And Duquesne says, yeah, because once I have that Braxton, plus this Braxton you already caught, plus the Braxton I relieved of duty earlier, that completes my punch card and I get a free Braxton. So Janeway goes back and captures Braxton again and returns to the timeship, and Duquesne says, thanks, we'll send you back to your native time frame now, and we'll recombine you with the other 7 of 9, which is a thing we can do. Just don't talk about this to anyone. And Captain Janeway, try to avoid time travel from now on, okay? Okay, I promise to avoid time travel, unless the future turns out different than I wanted it to. The end! One thing that never ceases to impress me about the writers of Star Trek shows, especially as the franchise has aged and continued to produce new works, is how unfailingly creative they are in coming up with minor variations on well-worn tropes, particularly when those tropes are related to time travel. For a show about people exploring the stars, there are a ton of time travel plots in Star Trek, and they all manage to take very similar concepts and do something just a little bit different with them every time. Relativity is a good example. We've seen Star Trek do the hero must prevent changes to the timeline plot a bunch of times before and after this episode was produced. Usually, this kind of plot operates by introducing the change to the timeline first, then making it our hero's goal to go back in time and prevent the change from taking place. See The City on the Edge of Forever, or the movie Star Trek First Contact. The writers of Relativity, Brian Fuller, Nick Sagan, and Michael Taylor, working from a story by Sagan, come up with a clever twist on this plot by telling it mostly from the point of view of someone who comes from before the timeline has been changed, who is sent back to prevent that change from occurring in the first place by catching the time criminal in the act. It's a way of refocusing our attention to a different part of the premise than we're accustomed to. Normally, with a plot like this, the timeline change occurs far in the past, and our heroes have to fix it to prevent the world they know from being changed for the worse. This time, it's the destruction of our heroes that changes the timeline. We never actually get to see that altered timeline. It doesn't matter to this story. What matters is 7 of 9 needs to prevent Voyager from being blown up. So, points for creativity in crafting the premise, and points for allowing the plot to naturally unwind for a bit before having a character show up and flatly explain what's going on. I enjoy it when a story unfolds in a way that allows for revelation and discovery, that gives the audience a chance to figure out what's happening rather than just immediately dropping exposition on us. At the end of Season 5 of the show, we're suddenly starting an episode with Voyager still docked at the shipyard. We're seeing Janeway board the ship for the first time. What's up with that? Why are we seeing this? Then we see that 7 of 9 is here, disguised as a Starfleet officer. Aha! Something is afoot. But what? We don't find out exactly what yet. We watch 7 go about her business, and the picture becomes clearer. We're allowed to start working out what's happening on our own, by watching, by paying attention, which in turn invites us to keep paying attention. The problem the episode runs into, especially in these early scenes, which still work well enough despite this issue, is that a lot of what we're being encouraged to pay attention to isn't all that interesting. The Janeway's first day on Voyager stuff is intriguing initially because we're waiting to find out what's going on and why we're seeing this. But once 7 of 9 is revealed, that other shoe drops and our attention should be directed exclusively to her. Instead, as we follow 7 on her mission, we also keep cutting back to Janeway and the Admiral on the tour. There's a whole scene of Janeway and the Admiral going to sickbay that has no reason to be in this episode at all. It's as though the storytellers were like, hey, as long as we're here anyway, you want to see the first time Janeway met the Doctor? And no, actually, I don't give a shit. The scene has nothing to do with the plot. It's not interesting in its own right. Why is this here? Once 7 is revealed as being aboard Voyager in the past on a secret mission, the cuts back to Janeway touring the ship feel like pointless filler. I know the episode isn't going to be about this now. Cut back to 7. Thank you very much. The problem goes away once this version of 7 dies and Captain Braxton has to recruit 7 again to continue the mission. The everybody's getting space sick and time is acting all goofy portion of the episode drags a bit for me, since even though we haven't had it properly explained yet, we have a good general idea of what's going on, which means we're ahead of the characters at this point, waiting for them to catch up. A certain amount of this is necessary to orient us as to what's happening on Voyager in the present before Duquesne plucks 7 out of time again, but I had a feeling of impatience while watching it. I know what's going to happen, and now I'm waiting for it to happen, and not in an edge-of-my-seat kind of way, in a kind of way. Things pick up a little bit once 7 has been brought aboard the timeship, briefed on her mission, and sent back to Voyager during the battle with the Kazon. We see just enough of the fight with the Kazon to give us the context and spend most of our time with 7. The cuts back to the Janeway of this time period focus on her recognizing the temporal disruption that was previously detected at the shipyard, and that leading her to 7, which leads to her ultimately teaming up with 7 to capture the saboteur. It all fits in with the story being told. It makes sense. It pulls us along at a decent pace. The reveal that Braxton is the saboteur is a fun twist, and now that I've mentioned it, I need to mention 2 things related to it. One good and one not so good. The good thing is Bruce McGill. I alluded to his role as Jack Dalton in MacGyver during the plot summary, and he will live forever in my heart because of that. But beyond that, he's one of those actors who I'm always happy to see, whatever he's in. He has fantastic comic timing, and he can bring this slightly unstable energy that makes it so you don't want to take your eyes off of him. Even before the future version of Braxton is revealed as the saboteur, McGill gives Braxton a bit of a gleam in his eye. It feels like he's up to something. When he warns 7 of 9 to look out for the Janeway factor, it's obvious that he has an axe to grind against Janeway, but he's trying to keep his feelings in check and remain professional. Then, when Saboteur Braxton shows up, McGill plays him in a way that makes it obvious he's gone cuckoo without going too far over the top with it. It's a good performance. But that brings me to the not-so-good thing related to the "it was Braxton all along" reveal. As good as Bruce McGill is, given this material, he could have been even better with slightly different material that allowed him to take fuller advantage of his comedic talents. Because here's the thing, the reveal that the saboteur who's been attempting to blow up Voyager this whole time is actually a future version of Captain Braxton, who has been driven mad by constantly having to clean up after Janeway when she fucks up the timeline, that's a wacky reveal. That feels like it should be funnier than it is. Like it belongs in a funnier episode than this. When you break it down, the whole plot feels better suited to a comedic episode than a straight dramatic one. A timeship from the future, led by a captain and first officer who seem to have a tense relationship, yoinks 7 of 9 out of her timeline and drafts her to be a temporal agent because, for some reason, her Borg eyes can see time anomalies better than the sensors on their timeship, and they have to draft her multiple times because she keeps dying on these missions, and when she finally succeeds, By getting help from Captain Janeway, who the captain of the timeship hates, she discovers that the saboteur is the future version of the timeship captain, who is at the end of his rope from having to deal with Captain Janeway for so many years. That's not the plot of a serious episode. That's a madcap caper. Bruce McGill is great at madcap capers. And I bet Jerry Ryan would be great in one too. 7 of 9 is utterly unflappable, which makes her the ideal straight man for a wacky comedy episode. Or even if it wasn't a full-on comedy episode, this material would have been better served, I think, by a lighter touch. A bit breezier, a bit zanier, a bit more irreverent. The elements for a fun, amusing adventure story are here. I just wish the episode leaned into those elements more, instead of trying to take so much of this so seriously. I also wish the writers had been as creative in coming up with an ending as they were in tweaking the initial premise. Once Braxton is revealed as the culprit, it feels like the episode doesn't know where to go from there. Braxton tries to escape, Seven chases him, and then eventually Braxton just gets cornered and caught. Then there's a clunky denouement where Janeway gets sent back in time, again, to capture Braxton, again, to clean up the timeline, and that's it. The episode doesn't so much reach its destination as it just runs out of gas. And that's too bad, since there was potential here for something more. Relativity is not a bad episode. It wastes time, it squanders some promising prospects for comedy, and its ending is awkward and underwhelming, but it finds a new angle on an old premise. It's mostly watchable. It has a fun little twist near the end, and come on, Bruce McGill. No complaints there. It's not great, but it could be worse, and I bet if the writers could go back and take another run at it, they'd do a better job the second time around. If only that were an option, eh, folks? Those are my thoughts on Relativity. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Join me next time as we conclude this batch of reviews of episodes about alternate timelines with an episode of Star Trek Enterprise titled Twilight. That's next week. See you then. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.